The morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of Rosie's diner, casting a warm glow over the familiar surroundings. The diner's scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, a comforting embrace for its regular patrons. Clara adjusted her apron, her brown hair pulled back into a neat bun, and took a deep breath. This was her sanctuary. Here she could forget her worries, if only for a moment, as she served others with a smile. Clara moved with graceful efficiency, her mind a whirlwind of orders and familiar faces. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she called out to an elderly man hunched over a newspaper in the corner booth. He looked up, his face breaking into a grin. "Morning, Clara, the usual, please," he replied, his voice warm and cheerful. "Coming right up." Clara jotted down his order before gliding towards the kitchen, where the cook, Gus, was already busy at the grill. "Hey, Gus, 1 coffee and 2 eggs over easy," she shouted, her voice rising above the sizzling sounds. "Got it?" He nodded, flipping a pancake with practiced skill. As Clara returned to the main dining area, she made a quick stop at the table of a young mother, her toddler making a mess with syrup. "You're having a good time, aren't you?" Clara chuckled, wiping the table with a cloth. The mother shot her an apologetic smile, which Clara returned with understanding. She loved this job, the connection it fostered. Yet beneath her cheerful demeanor, a hint of her own struggles lingered in the back of her mind. Clara had faced her share of challenges, losing her grandmother, the only family she felt truly close to, a year ago. The ache of that loss occasionally crept in, but she buried it deep, channeling her energy into uplifting others. Just then, the bell above the diner door jingled softly, drawing Clara's attention. A woman entered, her frail figure cloaked in a long dark coat that seemed heavy with sorrow. Clara's heart tugged at the sight. The woman's silver hair framed a face that told stories of grief, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something she had lost. Clara approached her table, her smile unwavering. "Good morning, welcome to Rosie's Diner. Can I get you something to drink?" The woman looked up, momentarily startled, as if Clara's presence had pulled her from a deep reverie. "Oh, just coffee, please," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, 1 coffee coming right up," Clara replied, her heart aching for the woman. She recognized that look of sadness all too well. It mirrored her own when she had lost her grandmother. As Clara poured the coffee, she couldn't help but glance at the woman again. There was something profoundly vulnerable about her, and Clara felt an overwhelming urge to reach out. "I'm Clara, by the way. If you need anything else, just let me know," she said, placing the steaming cup gently in front of her. "Thank you, dear," the woman said, her voice softening slightly. "I'm Rosa, just trying to find my way today." "Take your time, Mrs. Rosa," Clara replied, her tone warm and inviting. "Sometimes this place can offer a little comfort." Mrs. Rosa nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Clara returned to her duties, but kept an eye on the widow, her heart heavy with empathy. She could sense that there was a story behind those sad eyes, one that deserved to be heard. After a few minutes, Clara decided to check on her. She approached Mrs. Rosa's table again, her heart racing slightly. "Would you like to join me for a cup of coffee? I could use the company," Clara offered, her voice genuine. Mrs. Rosa looked up, surprised but touched. "Oh, I wouldn't want to intrude." "It's no intrusion at all. I'd love to hear about your day," Clara insisted, pulling out the chair across from her. With a hesitant smile, Mrs. Rosa nodded and gestured for Clara to sit. "Well, I suppose a little company wouldn't hurt. It's been a lonely few weeks." Clara's heart ached at the admission. "I'm really sorry to hear that. If you feel comfortable sharing, I'm here to listen." "Mother." Rosa took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she clutched her coffee cup. "I lost my husband a month ago. We were together for over 50 years. It's hard to imagine my life without him." "Oh, Mrs. Rosa, I can't even begin to understand how painful that must be," Clara said softly, her own memories of loss flooding back. "But I believe that the love you shared will always be a part of you." Tears slipped down Mrs. Rosa's cheeks, but her smile was bittersweet. "You're very kind, Clara. It's just that the world feels so empty without him. I keep expecting him to walk through that door, but he never does." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of the widow's grief. "It's okay to miss him. to feel lost. But you're not alone. Sometimes sharing those memories can help lighten the burden. Mrs. Rosa's gaze softened, and she began to share stories of her late husband, her voice growing stronger with each word. He loved to garden. Every spring, he would plant marigolds and daisies. He said they brought color to life. We'd spend hours in the backyard just talking and laughing. As Clara listened, she felt a connection blossoming between them. It was a fragile bond, woven together by shared experiences of love and loss. "That sounds beautiful," Clara replied, her smile genuine. "Those memories will always keep him alive in your heart." Mrs. Rosa nodded, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you, Clara. It's been a while since I've talked about him. It feels good to remember the happy times." Clara felt a warmth spread through her as she realized the profound impact of their conversation. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but in that moment, she understood just how vital it was to connect with others, especially those in pain. As they continued to talk, the diner bustled around them, but Clara and Mrs. Rosa existed in their own little world, a sanctuary of shared sorrow and solace. Clara was determined to help this woman find her way back to the light, just as she had found her own path through the darkness. Yet, as the clock ticked on, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would lead to something unexpected, something that could change both their lives forever. As she refilled Mrs. Rosa's coffee cup, she felt a sense of purpose swell within her, a quiet promise that she would do everything in her power to support the grieving widow. "Mrs. Rosa," Clara said gently as she placed the cup down, "if you ever want to talk again or if you need anything, please don't hesitate to come back. I'm here for you." Mrs. Rosa's eyes sparkled with unshed tears, but this time they were mixed with hope. "Thank you, Clara. You have a beautiful heart. It means more than you know." Clara smiled, her spirit buoyed by the connection they had forged. As she returned to her duties, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a flicker of hope ignited in the midst of sorrow. Little did she know, just 2 days later, her life would intertwine even more intricately with Mrs. Rosa's, setting her on a path she could never have imagined. Clara watched as Mrs. Rosa cradled her coffee cup, her fingers trembling slightly. The steam rose in delicate spirals, blurring the sadness etched on her face. Clara felt a warm glow inside her as she thought about the connection they had formed over their brief conversation. It was strange how a simple act of kindness could forge such an immediate bond. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me. Just having someone to talk to, it eases the weight on my heart." Clara smiled gently, her own heart swelling with empathy. "I'm glad I could be here for you, Mrs. Rosa. Sometimes it helps to share our burdens. You're not alone in this." Mrs. Rosa nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You remind me so much of my late husband. He always knew how to make me feel better, even on my darkest days. It's comforting to know that kindness still exists in the world." Clara felt a pang in her heart as she recalled her own grandmother, who had been her pillar of strength during tough times. "I believe kindness is essential," she replied softly. "We all go through difficult moments. If we can lift each other up, then we're doing something good." Mrs. Rosa took a deep breath, visibly calming as she absorbed Clara's words. "You're a special young woman, Clara. I hope you know that." Their conversation lingered in the air, a warm embrace that eased the chill of loneliness. Clara felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her, a gentle reminder that even small gestures could have a profound impact. After Mrs. Rosa left, Clara returned to her busy shift, her mind still swirling with thoughts of their interaction. She served customers with a renewed energy, the clanging of dishes and the hum of voices around her blending into a comforting symphony. Yet the memory of Mrs. Rosa remained vivid, sparking something deep within Clara's heart. As she poured coffee and delivered plates, Clara's thoughts meandered back to the widow. She wondered how Mrs. Rosa was coping, if she had anyone else to lean on. Clara felt compelled to do more, to extend her hand to others who might be suffering. "So what's got you all smiley today?" came a teasing voice from behind the counter. It was Joe, the diner's gruff but lovable cook, wiping his hands on his apron as he eyed Clara with curiosity. "Oh, you know," Clara replied a little shyly. "Just had a nice conversation with a customer." "Who? The old lady with the sad eyes?" Joe asked, tilting his head in thought. "Did you manage to cheer her up?" "I hope so," Clara said, her voice earnest. "She seemed really grateful. Sometimes a kind word is all it takes." Joe chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got a heart of gold, kid. Just don't let it get trampled on by the world." "I won't," Clara promised, her resolve firm. She knew that kindness was not always reciprocated, but she believed in its power nonetheless. As the hours passed, Clara found herself lost in thought, contemplating how she could make a difference. She could volunteer at the local shelter, or perhaps visit nursing homes. Each idea brought a sense of purpose that filled her with warmth. The connection she had forged with Mrs. Rosa inspired her to seek out others in need of companionship and support. 2 days later, the diner was bustling with activity as the morning crowd filled the seats. Clara moved deftly between tables, her smile unwavering despite the hustle and bustle. As she poured coffee and took orders, she kept an eye on the door, half hoping to see Mrs. Rosa again. Suddenly, the bell above the entrance jingled, and Clara looked up to see a well-dressed man step inside. He exuded a commanding presence, his tailored suit and polished shoes contrasting sharply with the casual atmosphere of the diner. Clara paused, intrigued by the man's sharp features and confident stance. "Good morning," she greeted, forcing herself to focus on her job. "What can I get for you today?" The man approached the counter, his intense gaze scanning the menu board before settling on Clara. "I'll have a black coffee, please," he replied, his voice smooth and deep, "and a slice of that apple pie." Clara nodded, jotting down the order. "Coming right up." She turned to prepare his coffee, stealing glances at him from time to time. There was something about him that felt familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. As she set the steaming cup and slice of pie in front of him, she noticed the way he scrutinized her, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "Thank you," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "You're Clara, aren't you?" "Yes, that's me," she replied, a little taken aback. "How did you know?" "I've heard about you," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "I'm Michael. I'm Mrs. Rosa's nephew." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I had no idea." She felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. "How is Mrs. Rosa?" "Worried, but she's coping," Michael replied, his expression softening. "She mentioned you helped her through a tough time the other day. Thank you for being there for her." Clara felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "It was nothing, really. I just listened to her, that's all." "Sometimes that's all someone needs," Michael said thoughtfully. "You made a real difference in her life. It's not every day you find someone willing to extend a hand to others." Clara smiled, her humility shining through. "I just try to treat others the way I'd want to be treated." Michael nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "That's admirable. I wish more people had that attitude. It could change the world." As they continued talking, Clara found herself captivated by Michael's presence. He spoke with a passion that resonated with her own desire to help others. The conversation flowed easily, and she began to feel a sense of kinship with him. "Do you work here often?" he asked, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Every day," Clara replied. "It's a busy place, but I love it. The customers are like family." "Family is important," Michael said, his tone taking on a more serious note. "Especially in times like these." Clara sensed a depth behind his words, an unspoken pain that mirrored Mrs. Rosa's sorrow. She wanted to probe further, to understand the man behind the polished exterior, but she hesitated, unsure if it was her place to pry. "Are you from around here?" she asked instead, redirecting the conversation. "Not originally," he admitted. "I moved here a few years ago for work, but I've come to love this community. It's full of good people." Clara felt a rush of pride at his words. "It really is. Everyone looks out for each other here." Michael smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that made Clara's heart flutter. "That's something I admire about you, Clara. You genuinely care about others." As their conversation continued, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was somehow significant. Little did she know that Michael's presence in her life was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her toward unexpected changes. As Clara continued bustling around the diner, the bell above the door jingled, and her eyes caught sight of the well-dressed man who had entered. He carried an air of authority, his tailored suit accentuating his tall frame. The moment he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The regular customers paused their conversations, glancing at him with curiosity. Clara, however, was too busy to dwell on the newcomer for long. She approached his table with her usual warm smile, ready to take his order. "Good morning. What can I get started for you today?" Clara asked, not missing the hint of tension in her voice. There was something about him that made her nervous. "Coffee, please, black," he replied, his voice smooth and deep. Clara noted the way he spoke, precise and deliberate, as if every word was carefully chosen. She poured the coffee into his cup, and as she did, she couldn't help but steal glances at him. She sensed that he was not just a stranger passing through. There was a depth in his eyes that hinted at a story yet untold. "Anything to eat?" she inquired, trying to keep the conversation light. "Not just yet, I'm waiting for someone," he answered, his gaze drifting toward the door, as if expecting someone to arrive. Clara nodded, moving on to serve another table, but her curiosity lingered. She returned to him a few minutes later, her notepad ready. "Are you waiting for someone special?" she asked, a playful smile on her lips. He chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to resonate in the air. "You could say that. Family, actually. My aunt has been coming here quite often," he replied, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Mrs. Rosa?" Clara's heart skipped a beat as she realized the connection. She remembered the widow's frail figure and the sorrow in her eyes. "I've met her. She's a lovely woman. I tried to do what I could to help her." Michael looked at her, and for a moment, the atmosphere between them shifted again. "I've heard about your kindness," he said, his tone earnest. "I'm Michael, by the way, Mrs. Rosa's nephew." Clara's heart raced as she processed his introduction. "Oh, I'm Clara. It's nice to meet you, Michael. I hope your aunt is doing okay," she replied, trying to maintain her composure despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "She's been struggling," Michael admitted, his expression softening, "but I know she's found some comfort in your company. It means a lot to me, really." "I just listened to her stories," Clara said, a hint of humility in her voice. "I can't imagine what she's going through." Michael leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You have a gift, Clara, the ability to listen and make people feel seen. That's not something everyone possesses," he said, his words wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She felt a rush of warmth at his compliment, but quickly shook it off. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "Not everyone would," he countered, his eyes locking onto hers. "That's why I came here today. I've been looking for someone who can help my aunt during this difficult time. She needs support, and I believe you can provide that." Clara blinked, taken aback by his words. "Me? I'm just a waitress," she stammered, the weight of his request settling on her shoulders. "I don't know if I can do anything substantial." Michael leaned forward, his demeanor turning serious. "Clara, you've already made a difference. It's not just about the big gestures, it's the small ones that count. You've brought a spark of joy back into her life, and that's invaluable." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and Clara felt a mix of pride and anxiety swell within her. "I appreciate that, but I don't know how I could help your aunt beyond what I've already done," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Michael took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "What if I told you that your kindness could lead to something greater? I have an idea that could benefit not just my aunt, but others in our community as well. It's about setting up a charity event in honor of her late husband, aimed at supporting widows and orphans. I want you to help organize it." Clara's heart raced at the thought. "A charity event," she echoed, her mind racing. The idea was beautiful, yet the responsibility felt overwhelming. I don't know anything about organizing events." "Neither did I when I started," he replied, a hint of encouragement in his tone. "But I believe in you. You have the passion, and I can provide the resources. Together we can create something meaningful." Clara's thoughts spun in a whirlwind. The opportunity was enticing, yet the fear of failure loomed large. "I've never done anything like that. What if I mess it up?" she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael smiled gently, a reassuring presence amidst her uncertainty. "Mistakes are part of the process. What matters is the impact we can make. Imagine how many lives we could touch, how many people we could support. Your heart is in the right place, Clara. That's what counts." She paused, the weight of his words sinking in. The thought of extending her kindness beyond the confines of the diner filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. "If I do this, I want to do it right. I want to honor Mrs. Rosa's husband and truly help those in need," she stated, her voice gaining strength. "Then let's do it together," Michael urged, his enthusiasm infectious. "We'll figure it out as we go. You have an incredible ability to connect with people, and I can handle the logistics. We can make this happen." As Clara considered his proposal, she felt a flicker of excitement ignite within her. Perhaps this was her chance to step outside her comfort zone, to make a real difference. "Okay," she said, a determined glint in her eyes. "I'll help. I want to be a part of this." Michael's face lit up with a smile that radiated warmth. "You won't regret it, Clara. We'll make this a beautiful tribute to your aunt's husband, and I know it will mean the world to her." For the first time that morning, Clara felt a surge of hope. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but with Michael by her side, it didn't feel quite as heavy. They began discussing ideas for the event, brainstorming ways to engage the community and raise funds. With each passing moment, Clara felt her fears begin to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. As the diner buzzed around them, Clara and Michael found themselves lost in conversation, the world outside fading away. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would not only change their lives, but also the lives of countless others in need. The diner buzzed with the familiar sounds of clinking dishes and murmured conversations as Clara wiped down the counter, her thoughts still lingering on her recent encounter with Michael. The man had entered the diner like a whirlwind, bringing with him an unexpected storm of emotions. As the waitress continued her routine, she couldn't shake off the gravity of his proposal, the charity event in honor of Mrs. Rosa's late husband. It was a noble idea, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. "Clara, 2 eggs over easy, please," called out Mr. Thompson, the regular who always sat in the corner booth. His voice snapped her back to reality, and she quickly jotted down his order before moving to the kitchen. As she worked, her mind raced. How could she possibly help organize such an event? Sure, she had a knack for bringing people together, but this was different. This was a chance to make a real impact in the community, a chance to reach out to those who, like Mrs. Rosa, were struggling with grief and loss. "Clara, you okay?" asked Jenna, her fellow waitress, noticing Clara's distracted demeanor. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Clara replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about the charity event." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one that lawyer guy proposed? Are you really considering it?" "I think I have to," Clara said softly, her heart racing at the thought. "It's more than just an event for Mrs. Rosa. It could help so many people. I can't just let this opportunity slip away." Jenna shrugged, a teasing grin forming on her lips. "Well, if anyone can pull it off, it's you, Clara. Just don't forget us little folk when you're rolling in the dough after the event." Clara chuckled, appreciating her friend's light-heartedness, but feeling the weight of the task ahead. After the lunch rush, she found a moment to breathe and took out her phone. She hesitated for a moment before dialing Michael's number. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Clara, I was hoping you would call." Michael's voice came through, warm and inviting. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Clara admitted, trying to keep her voice steady. "I want to help. I really do, but I'm not sure where to start." "Let's meet up and discuss it in detail," he suggested. "How about we grab a coffee after your shift? I can bring some ideas and we can brainstorm together." "Sure, that sounds great," Clara replied, a hint of excitement bubbling within her. "I'll be done around 6. "Perfect, I'll see you then," Michael said before hanging up. As the clock ticked closer to 6, Clara's nerves began to flare again. She finished her shift, her mind swirling with thoughts of what the meeting could entail. Would she be able to contribute? Would she be able to rally the community around this cause? She stepped outside the diner, the evening air cool against her skin, and made her way to the nearby coffee shop where she was meeting Michael. When she arrived, Michael was already seated at a corner table, a notepad and several papers spread out before him. He looked up as she approached, his expression brightening with a smile. "Clara, I'm glad you made it," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been looking forward to this." "Me too," Clara replied, taking a seat across from him. She felt a flutter of nerves, but also a strange sense of camaraderie. "So, what do you have in mind?" Michael slid a piece of paper towards her. "I've drafted a preliminary plan for the event. I thought we could start with a simple fundraiser, a dinner or a silent auction. We could invite local businesses to donate items or services." Clara leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "That sounds like a great idea. We could definitely get the community involved." "Exactly," Michael replied, enthusiasm radiating from him. "And we could set up a small committee to help organize everything. I know some people who have experience in event planning." Clara's heart raced at the thought of working with others who shared her passion. "I'd love to help coordinate that. We could reach out to Mrs. Rosa's friends and see who would be interested in joining us." "Absolutely. I want this to be a community-driven effort," Michael said, scribbling notes as they spoke. "The more people feel involved, the more successful the event will be, and I think it could be a great way for Mrs. Rosa to feel supported." "Right," Clara agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. "We could even share some stories about her husband during the event, maybe have a memory wall where people can write down their favorite memories." Michael looked up, his eyes sparkling with admiration. "That's a brilliant idea, Clara. It would give people a chance to reflect and honor his memory in a meaningful way." As they continued to brainstorm, Clara felt a warmth spreading within her. Here she was, sitting across from a man who cared deeply for his family and community, and together they were building something that could make a difference. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared ideas. The more they talked, the more Clara felt a connection to Michael, a bond forming over their shared goal. "Do you think we should set a date for the event?" Clara asked, glancing at the notes they had compiled. "Yes, we should," Michael replied, tapping his pen against the table thoughtfully. "How about a date in the next couple of months? It gives us time to plan, but isn't too far off that people lose interest." "Maybe a Saturday evening," Clara suggested. "That way more people would be able to attend." "Great idea, let's aim for that," Michael said, scribbling down the date. Their conversation flowed seamlessly, ideas bouncing back and forth between them as they outlined what would become a significant event in their community. As the evening wore on, Clara found herself smiling more than she had in a long time. Michael's passion was infectious, and his genuine care for his aunt and the cause they were supporting made her heart swell. She was determined to give it her all. "Clara, I really appreciate your enthusiasm and creativity. It's refreshing," Michael said, his gaze earnest as he looked at her. "I can tell you genuinely care about making a difference." "Thank you, Michael. It means a lot to hear that," Clara replied, her cheeks warming slightly. "I think we can really do something special here." As they wrapped up their meeting, Clara felt invigorated. They had laid the groundwork for something significant, and she was eager to dive into the planning. But as she stood to leave, she felt a pang of uncertainty. "Michael, can I ask you something?" Clara hesitated, her voice softening. "What inspired you to want to do this event for your aunt? I mean, it's such a heartfelt gesture." Michael paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "To be honest, I've seen how much she has struggled since losing her husband. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you love go through such pain. I want to do something that honors his memory and helps her heal." Clara nodded, understanding the depth of his compassion. "That's beautiful, Michael. I'm sure Mrs. Rosa will appreciate it more than you know." "Let's make it a success for her," Michael said, determination in his voice. "Together, we can create something that truly makes a difference." With that, Clara left the coffee shop, her heart full of hope. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but now, alongside Michael, she felt empowered to take action. The charity event was just the beginning, and Clara could already envision the positive impact it would have on the lives of those in need. As she turned the corner towards her apartment, she couldn't help but smile at the thought of what lay ahead. Clara stood behind the counter of the diner, her hands busy with the familiar motions of pouring coffee and serving plates of food. Yet today felt different. A tangible excitement filled the air as she and Michael prepared for the charity event they had been organizing for weeks. The event was set to honor Mrs. Rosa's late husband, a man whose life had touched many, and Clara could feel the energy of the community rallying behind them. "Hey, Clara!" Michael called out from the back where he was sorting through the donation boxes. His voice was warm and reassuring, cutting through the clatter of dishes and chatter of customers. "Can you help me with these banners? I think they need a bit more flair." "Sure thing," Clara responded, a smile spreading across her face. She loved the way Michael's enthusiasm seemed to amplify her own. Together, they had created something beautiful out of their shared compassion for others. As she moved to join him, she couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come since their first meeting. As they worked side by side, Clara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in a long time. She looked over at Michael, who was now holding a bright blue banner. "What do you think, too much blue?" he asked, tilting his head in contemplation. Clara chuckled softly. "I think it's perfect, just like the sky on a sunny day. It'll brighten the whole room." Michael grinned, clearly pleased with her response. "All right, sky it is. You know, I never would have thought I'd be doing something like this. I usually deal with contracts and legal jargon, not banners and community events." Clara laughed, the sound light and airy, a stark contrast to the seriousness of their earlier conversations about loss and grief. "Well, you're doing great. You have a knack for it, honestly. People are going to love this event." "Thanks to you," he replied, his gaze steady on hers. There was a moment of silence as they exchanged smiles, each recognizing the bond that had formed between them. Clara quickly looked away, focusing on the task at hand, her heart fluttering unexpectedly. As the day progressed, the diner buzzed with anticipation. Regulars came in and out, all of them expressing their excitement about the event. Clara noticed Mrs. Rosa sitting at her usual booth, her eyes sparkling with gratitude as she watched the preparations unfold. Clara felt a swell of pride. It was for her that they were doing this. "Clara, can you come here for a second?" Mrs. Rosa called, her voice laced with warmth. Clara hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, Mrs. Rosa, how can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I just wanted to say thank you. You've brought so much joy back into my life, and I can never express how much that means to me," Mrs. Rosa said, her eyes moistening with emotion. "You've given me hope." Clara felt her throat tighten. "You don't have to thank me, really. I'm just doing what anyone would do. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Mrs. Rosa." Mrs. Rosa reached out and took Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. "No, dear, you've done more than that. You've reminded me that kindness still exists in this world, even in the darkest times." Clara blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the older woman's words. "I'm just glad I could be here for you," she whispered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara and Michael made their final preparations. The diner had transformed into a vibrant space filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of delicious food. Guests began to arrive, each one greeted with warmth and smiles. Clara moved through the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. "Look at this turnout," Michael exclaimed, standing beside her with an expression of awe. The room was filled with familiar faces, all united for a cause that had touched their hearts. "I can't believe how generous everyone has been." "It's incredible," Clara agreed, her eyes scanning the room. "I never imagined we could make such a difference." As the evening unfolded, Clara took on various roles, serving food, welcoming guests, and sharing stories about Mrs. Rosa's husband. The laughter echoed throughout the diner, each chuckle a reminder of the love that bound them all together. Clara felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her, grounding her in the moment. "Hey, Clara!" Michael called out, waving her over to where he was standing near the stage they had set up. "We need to make a toast." Clara joined him, her heart racing with excitement. She didn't know how many people were aware of the significance of the event, but she could feel the energy coursing through the crowd. Michael raised his glass, and everyone turned their attention to him. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady and sincere. "We're here not just to honor the memory of my aunt's husband, but to celebrate the spirit of community and kindness. Clara has shown us that even small acts can create ripples of love and support. Let's raise our glasses to kindness and to remembering those we've lost." Cheers erupted around the room, glasses clinking, and Clara felt her cheeks flush with warmth. She had never been one to seek the spotlight, but tonight felt different. The love and appreciation surrounding her were palpable, and she couldn't help but smile. As the night wore on, Clara noticed Mrs. Rosa standing at the back, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. Clara approached her gently. "Are you okay, Mrs. Rosa?" "Oh, my dear," Mrs. Rosa replied, her voice trembling. "I'm just so proud. This is beautiful. Your heart shines, Clara." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "I'm just so glad you're here." After the speeches and toasts, the night transitioned into a celebration filled with dancing and laughter. Clara found herself swept up in the moment, moving to the rhythm of the music. She glanced over at Michael, who was engaged in conversation with some guests, and she felt a rush of affection for him. However, just as Clara began to believe that everything was finally falling into place, a wave of panic swept through the room. A commotion near the donation table caught her attention. She rushed over, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice rising above the noise. "The large donation box, it's gone!" someone exclaimed, their expression filled with shock. Clara felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean gone?" "It was right here, and now it's missing." Another voice chimed in, panic creeping into their tone. Clara's heart raced as she processed the implications. This was not just a loss, it was a devastating blow to everything they had worked for. "No, no, no," Clara whispered to herself, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. All their hard work, the love and effort they had poured into this event, it could all slip away in an instant. Michael joined her, his expression grave. "Clara," he said urgently, "we need to figure this out. We can't let this ruin everything." "I know," Clara replied, her voice trembling. "But how? We can't just—" "Let's split up and ask everyone if they've seen anything," he suggested, determination igniting in his eyes. "We'll find it." "Okay," Clara said, trying to steady her racing heart. "I'll check the kitchen and back rooms, you ask around here." As they moved through the crowd, Clara felt a mix of hope and despair. She couldn't believe this was happening. They had worked so hard for this moment, and now it felt like it was all unraveling, but she couldn't give up. Not now. Clara's mind raced with possibilities as she searched the kitchen. She glanced around, hoping against hope that the box had simply been misplaced. But deep down, she feared the worst. What if they didn't find it? What if all their efforts had been in vain? With a heavy heart, Clara continued her search, determined to do everything she could to salvage the night. The atmosphere in the diner was tense as Clara and Michael stood amid the chaos of the charity event. The missing donation had left a pall over their hard work, and Clara felt the weight of disappointment pressing down on her. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, Michael's phone rang, slicing through the murmurs of concern around them. "Hello?" Michael answered, his brow furrowing as he listened intently. Clara could see the shift in his demeanor, the way his eyes widened and a spark of intrigue ignited within him. After a few moments, he nodded slowly, his expression turning serious. "Yes, I understand. Thank you for reaching out." He ended the call and turned to Clara, his voice a mixture of excitement and urgency. "Clara, you won't believe this. That was a potential donor who has been following the event closely. They want to contribute significantly to our cause, but—" He hesitated, gauging her reaction. "They want you to be at the forefront of the organization." "What?" Clara exclaimed, her mind racing. "Why me? I'm just a waitress who wanted to help. Surely there are more qualified people." "Clara, they specifically mentioned you," Michael interrupted gently. "They've seen your dedication and how you've poured your heart into this event. This could be the lifeline we need." Clara's heart raced with disbelief, but a glimmer of hope flickered within her. Just when she thought everything was crumbling, here was an opportunity that could change everything. Yet even as hope blossomed, a nagging question tugged at her. "Who is this donor?" Michael's expression shifted and Clara could sense a hesitation. That's the thing, they didn't reveal their identity. They just mentioned that it's someone from your past. From my past? Clara echoed, confusion washing over her. What do you mean? Michael took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. They mentioned a name, Clara. They said it was your father. The words struck Clara like a thunderbolt, freezing her in place. Memories flooded her mind, fragments of her childhood, the laughter that turned into silence, the absence that had always lingered. Her father had left when she was young, a shadowy figure in her memories, and now he was being thrust back into her life in the most unexpected way. I can't believe it, Clara stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would he want to help me now? Michael stepped closer, his gaze earnest and supportive. I don't know, Clara, but this could be a chance for you to confront that part of your life, to find out why he left and maybe, just maybe, to heal some old wounds. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as the emotions swirled within her. Anger, confusion, betrayal, and an aching desire for reconciliation tangled together in a tempest that threatened to overwhelm her. I don't know if I can face him, she admitted, her voice trembling. After all these years, you're stronger than you think, Michael said softly. And you don't have to do this alone. I'll be right here with you. Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The idea of confronting her father felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into the chasm below. But what if this was the moment she had been waiting for? What if she could finally find some closure? Okay, she said, her voice steadier now. I'll do it. Michael nodded, relief washing over his features. Let's find out how to reach him. If he's willing to support the charity, maybe he's willing to talk. As they set off to unravel the mystery of her father's identity, Clara felt an unfamiliar mix of apprehension and resolve. They spent the next few hours working together, reaching out to contacts and digging through old records. Each step brought Clara closer to confronting her past. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, they found a lead. Michael made a phone call, and after a few moments of tense silence, he smiled at Clara. We have an address. He's living in the city. The air felt electric with anticipation as they drove to the address Michael had found. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing her doubts and fears. What would she say? What would he say? Did she even want to see him? As they arrived at a modest apartment building, Clara hesitated at the entrance. What if he doesn't want to see me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then you'll know, Michael replied, his tone reassuring. And if he does, you'll finally have the chance to tell him how you feel. With a deep breath, Clara pushed the door open and stepped inside. The familiar scent of aged wood and the faint sound of laughter drifted through the hall. Michael remained close by her side, offering silent support as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. When they reached apartment 204, Clara's heart raced. She raised her hand to knock but paused, the weight of her emotions crashing over her. What if this changes everything? She murmured. It might, Michael said gently, but it could also lead you to the healing you've been seeking. Clara knocked and the sound echoed in the quiet hallway. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s with graying hair and weary eyes. Time had etched lines on his face, but Clara could see traces of familiarity. Clara? He asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Dad, she breathed, the word foreign yet natural on her tongue. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of absence and unspoken words. Clara's heart raced as she fought against the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I didn't expect to find you here. I didn't expect you to come, he admitted, his gaze shifting to Michael. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to reach out. Clara felt a surge of anger rise within her. You left, Dad. You chose to disappear from my life. I know, he replied, his voice thick with regret. It was a mistake. I thought it was best for you. I thought you would be happier without me. Happy? Clara scoffed, tears brimming in her eyes. I was a little girl, and you left me. You broke my heart. I'm so sorry, he said, stepping forward, his expression pleading. I've thought about you every day. I wanted to come back, but I didn't know how. I was scared. Clara's heart wavered between anger and longing. You don't get to just come back after all these years and expect everything to be okay. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, his voice raw. I just want the chance to explain. I want to help you now. Help me? Clara echoed, skepticism lacing her tone. You mean help with the charity event? Yes, but it's more than that, he insisted, emotion flooding his voice. I want to be a part of your life again. I see the good you're doing, and I want to support that. I want to be there for you. Clara took a step back, her mind racing. The man before her was a stranger and yet so familiar. The years of hurt and longing collided within her, leaving her at a crossroads. I don't know if I can trust you again, she admitted, her voice trembling. Trust takes time, he said quietly, but I'm willing to earn it if you'll let me. As Clara looked into her father's eyes, she saw a glimmer of the man he once was, a man who had made mistakes, but was now offering a chance for redemption. She felt the weight of her past pressing down on her, but there was also an undeniable sense of hope. Let's start with the charity, she said finally, her voice steadying. If you want to help, then let's do this together. But know that this is just the beginning. Her father nodded, tears shining in his eyes. Thank you, Clara. I won't let you down again. As Clara stepped into the embrace of a potential future, she felt the burdens of her past begin to lift. In that moment, she realized that even amidst the chaos and the unexpected twists of life, there was always a chance for healing, redemption, and new beginnings.